Okay. If you thought the show was stressful, this is a stressful time for me because now I'm on stage, for real. To my immediate left is Phil Chen. He's Chief Content Officer and founder of the HTC Vive. For those of you who have not experienced the Vive yet, it's the magic behind the black curtains. Just by show of hands, how many of you had the chance to try out the Vive so far? Okay, wonderful. And if you like it, please applaud. And if you didn't like it, we'll talk outside, yeah? Okay. So, you know, Phil, by the way, there's something you should know about Phil. He just flew in today from Taiwan, yes? Was it a direct flight from Taiwan?
No, I was actually in San Francisco for a few days.
Okay, so originally I thought it was a 12-hour handicap, but still exhausted by 3 hours. So we have the advantage. So if you have difficult questions to ask, today is the time to ask them. So, you know, Phil, let me describe the moment when we first got connected. Actually, Phil, you just emailed me out of the blue, asking if you could, you know, speak at a burst, which was wonderful. And of course, we upgraded you to a keynote spot because it's a complete honor that you've come down. And, you know, for whatever reason, HTC has been in the news for reasons beyond the technology itself. And I think it's so important to talk about HTC as a company and the strength of HTC as a company because it does so much more. Your family actually does more even beyond HTC itself. And I was hoping we could talk a little bit about the company and the different things that you do. So maybe, I mean, it strikes me as a bit of a family company. Even though it's publicly traded, it's got a strong family behind it. Can you tell us a little bit about the HTC roots?
Sure. I think it probably would start with my grandfather, who was sort of one of the tea industrialists in Taiwan and helped the economy in Taiwan. And, you know, from that it was, you know, basically centered around manufacturing. Because of that, schools and hospitals. And he actually created probably the most successful hospital system in Asia. And hence, very instrumental of why Taiwan has one of the best, if not the best, healthcare system in Taiwan. And sort of another generation down there, you know, sons and daughters that went into technology. And of course, HTC is one of them. There's other ones where it's more via another IC company. And HTC is probably the more well-known one because it's the one that's more the most consumer-facing one. And so, yeah.
So I don't understand. So what does HTC do in Taiwanese healthcare? What's the role of the company?
Oh no, HTC is not directly involved in healthcare. What I meant was sort of the family of sort of sister companies that are involved. HTC, of course, is an independently run company, and so there's not a direct link except you know, different explorations which you would expect in any sort of biz dev partnerships.
Now, on a personal level, you do a lot of work for the public good. I mean, you've done different nonprofit organizations. Can you tell us a little bit about your work outside HTC?
Sure. We have a family foundation. Of course, you know, we invest in schools, or invest is probably not the right word, but we sponsor many schools. We sponsored over 3,000 elementary schools in China, and of course, hospitals are, of course, that's run almost like a nonprofit in Taiwan. But yeah, I think we're very, very sort of aware and socially conscious about the importance of giving back and the public good. And that includes sort of the bigger vision around HTC as well.
Now, personally speaking, I mean, even prior to HTC, I mean, you were educated at Stanford. Can you tell us a little bit about your career leading up to HTC?
Sure. Well, I actually went to school at UC San Diego. And then, you know, I was trained to be a scientist. My Stanford background was working at a high-energy physics lab at Stanford. And that happened to be on Sand Hill Road, which is sort of the center of all of BC in Silicon Valley. And I kind of got sucked into that world of startups, and that sort of began my startup journey from becoming a sort of pure scientist to a commercial entrepreneur path. And my first startup was an ebook company, and the vision around that was really, also, providing sort of education and access to digital media to sort of everyone, sort of democratizing that. And so that company eventually sold its patents to Barnes & Noble, that became the first lift, and sort of began my career into digital content.
So how did you end up making the jump into HTC? How did that go about?
It was that time when sort of that transition in the US side, Barnes & Noble, and in China, we sold it to another Chinese ebook company. And what's interesting about HTC is during that time, that was 2007 and 2008. If you recall, HTC were the first phone manufacturer to build bigger and bigger screens. And the insight really came because we realized people were doing this a lot more than this. And it ceased to be only a communication device, but really a media device. And so, and that insight sort of that insight started sort of the whole digital content media software craze in HTC, where we built bigger and bigger phones and content that you were looking at. It made a good or a bad thing in terms of screen time. It became more and more prevalent, and probably the most dominant behavior right now with mobile phones is the screen time instead of holding it to your ears. And so that started me on the path towards looking at digital content now.
So if you could talk a little bit about the mindset behind HTC. I'm going to say one word, and I'd like to hear from you what its significance is to you. Israel.
Israel is an interesting country, of course. It's a very small country. We liken it to Taiwan in the sense that it has very few natural resources. It's huge, probably primary focus on education and educating sort of as the primary goal for whether it's success in career or status or the growth of the economy. And because of that focus, it doesn't rely on natural resources, but it does rely on innovation. And that was both instrumental to the growth of Taiwan. Of course, Israel is of course thriving. And we think that model is the right model. We see ourselves as that type of company because we're sort of a smaller player, relatively speaking, in the world of sort of giants like us.
Can you talk, you gave mention to the very early Android smartphones. Can you talk about some of the companies you've partnered with that you're very proud of? That, innovative things you've done with other companies together that, HTC couldn't have done on their own and these other companies couldn't have done on their own?
Well, very few people know this, or notice it, but HTC did build the first smartphone, right? It's the first smartphone ever built because we were the first to build with Windows CE onto the first personal digital assistant, the PDA, the compact, and then we added communications into it. And so it was the first smartphone on Windows CE, then of course Windows Mobile. And we were also the first company to build an Android smartphone. And so those relationships are extremely important. Of course, Microsoft and Google on the software side. And we know we're a small country, we know what we're good at, and we know that we can't focus on our local market. And so we reach out to partners where we can cooperate deeply with.
Now, am I correct, you've done work directly with Qualcomm as well, for Snapdragon?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that, there's very much a sort of a deep cooperation. Our former CEO, Peter, always likes to say that Qualcomm and HTC is not 2 companies, it's 1.5 companies. So we sort of tread that line. But it's interesting how HTC is a friendly company to cooperate if there is something larger that can go on.
Now, you forgive me, I haven't tracked it very well, but the HTC does it have, let me phrase this carefully. HTC right now is very much known in the mobile field, but I understand it has early roots in PC as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it failed miserably in making laptops, but that was its first attempt into making hardware and software. Yeah.
And you also have roots, and we're going to talk about virtual reality very shortly, but you've got roots in other types of immersive technology as well. I mean, you did work in 3D as well, yes?
Which one are you referring to?
The stereoscopic, HTC.
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, HTC, of course, has been, the first, there are other few firsts, I mean, in smartphone hardware that HTC has done. HTC actually is the first to, with the dual speakers in front, to have surround stereo sound. We partnered with Dolby Atmos to integrate it into the phones. And mind you, we built the first dual camera system that had a depth sensor in our phones. And so it was the first mobile phone to capture depth, which you could of course extrapolate to be extremely important in the future for mobile VR capture.
So I have to ask the question. Wait, I want to ask the question. Why VR? I mean, you've got this. The company, of course, is going through interesting times. You've got to pick you pick your battles carefully. Why virtual reality? What was the appeal? How was it sold internally?
I think it was maybe 2012 where I started thinking about VR. I was sort of on, HTC has been on a roller coaster in terms of ups and downs. And it was at a time, of course, where we needed to search for the next platform. I mean, you see these sort of big platforms just, from PC mainframe and then, desktop and then, internet and then mobile and then, what's that next platform shift? We kind of went through the internet and mobile and we need to anticipate the next one. And so, I really stumbled upon VR. It was part of my job at HTC is to explore new territories, new technologies, and just by virtue of exploring, stumbled upon this company called Oculus, and reached out to them and got rejected, but then later that led me to Valve, and it was serendipity, I think, but I think anybody that saw it, once I remember bringing Cher, now the chairman, to see it for the first time. And I think everybody that's seen it for the first time are pretty easily convinced. This is not something I can talk about that can convince, but once you see it, you'll believe it.
So, if I can ask just briefly about your first reach out to Oculus, and it's not, we don't need any private information, but I'd be interested in knowing the vision of what were you hoping to gain, or what were you looking to gain from, and it could have been any company. Let's say it was Oculus A, B, C. What was HTC looking to do that coaxed that meeting?
Well, it's similar to the ones that I spoke before, right? The Microsofts of this world, the Googles of this world, and the Qualcomms, right? We know what we can offer to that partnership, and so is that same approach. It's really a model historically of how HTC works, and bringing our strengths to another strength that we saw. And so it was along the same lines as those partnerships.
So, if I was a partner for HTC, and again, forgive my ignorance, what would be the core strength of HTC that is the marketable skill? Like what do you bring to the table for your partners?
Well, it's a range, but we know what we do best is hardware, right? It's hardware engineering and integrating very complex software into that, right? And again, the Googles and the Microsoft, these are extremely complex systems that need sort of both hardware talent and also this interface between the hardware and the software. And so I would say that we do that the best in the world, those two things.
So things didn't obviously pan out with Oculus, but other opportunities came around. Valve, can you talk a little bit about the working relationship or the partnership you have with Valve?
Well, again, I think it's by serendipity and luck that we stumbled upon what we think is the best and superior tech in VR, right? Their software, they've actually been working on it much longer. It's been incubated in the company a lot longer. I think credit to Valve, we have a superior system because of many of the technologies that they've been incubating, right? And they very much have that entrepreneurial spirit. They have a very special culture within the company that lets them explore and let them sort of build on with the momentum they have in gaming already. But their software stack is sound, and their software stack is also very deep. And I think we're honored to partner with them.
So earlier in our conversation, you said that, and I'm quoting on this quote, when you work with a company, it becomes 1.5 companies. You're never quite 2 separate companies. So I think in the Valve world, it's 1.5. Can you define the roles? I know you talked about it a little bit, but is it like you're doing the hardware, they're doing the software, or is it like a meshing of minds and you're so interwoven that you can't possibly work as separate entities? Like, how would you describe the working relationship?
Yeah, it's difficult to sort of cut the line of where things work, but it really is a very deep relationship, right? Any human relationship that takes a lot of communication, takes a lot of hard work, and so I can't say if it's we can't really say this is pure hardware and software, but you can imagine our partnership before it is integrating very, very complex software to incredible hardware. Some of the hardware that you see is incredibly, you've never seen this on the market before. So it really is a deep type of collaboration.
Now, within HTC, does it do committed virtual reality research with hardware, or does it pick up the spec elsewhere, or is it like research internally how to create things from scratch for the best solution?
What do you mean?
Well, within HTC, let's say you're creating the Vive head mount. Is it designed within HTC? Is that where the creative juices happen?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I didn't understand. That's what I wasn't sure about, but that's good. So let's talk about content. I mean, that's your title, Chief Content Officer. So what excites you about virtual reality? I mean, as someone who collects content and disseminates content, what's exciting you?
Of course, the most exciting right now is of course gaming. Some of the gaming games that I've seen that I can talk about. It's mind-boggling, and I'm not a gamer myself, but I'm really sort of thrilled to see the creativity that this platform provides for game developers. And it's interesting to see game developers jump on it because it is the most, I think I can say, the most accessible and sort of natural medium for game developers to think about, more so than the other content genres that we're excited about. In fact, whether it's education or tourism, these are all content genres that we think are going to be far more disruptive. Only because gaming is I guess the obvious first content and vertical that people apply VR to. And so yeah, I think on the big direction we're excited about what's first gaming, getting that right, because that's already a complex enough problem. And then moving on to other competitions.
There's a video that you did, it's a promotional video for HTC, and you were talking about storytelling and the unique aspects of storytelling in VR. Can you talk about what elements virtual reality brings to storytelling that we didn't have access to before?
I think one space that I'm really sort of intrigued by is sort of the space of is more around live action rather than CG. I actually believe, and this is my personal belief, and there's going to be a lot more innovation in live action VR than CG VR. Most people wouldn't agree with me. And the reason I say that is because of sort of these volumetric cameras that I've seen that enable you, the degrees of freedom in sort of being involved in the story, being involved in the movie. And I don't mean by being interactive, because I still mean it in a way where it's linear storytelling, but the consumer, the audience gets to be involved in the sense of moving their camera. Right? I think in this sort of volumetric, I'll describe what that is later, but there's the camera, the audience can decide what camera angle you want to view a character, the story. And you can potentially watch a short film or experience a story 6 times, or how X many times, and have X many different experiences. I'm fascinated by what storytellers and filmmakers will come up with that technology.
So, one of the big achievements in a really well-told story, I think, is empathy. Appreciating what the characters are going through, or what your character in these turns is going through. What is the empathy engine?
I do think, and this is, many filmmakers use this word right now. Christo uses he uses the word empathy. Felix and Paul uses the word intimacy. But I think anybody who's tried VR and that sense of presence, and sort of the most dominant thing about VR is that, and also the first person point of view, right? And the there-ness, so to speak. All of those words sort of add up to becoming, the ultimate platform for intimacy and empathy, right? And so it has that huge potential to connect the audience and the filmmaker, the storyteller, in that capacity. And so, those are words that, of course, I think are the most obvious to anybody that's experienced it.
Now, earlier in your career, actually, in your continued work, I'm going to read this word for word because I want to make sure I get the words right here. You have a career that is highly focused on social good. If VR has the power to change the world somehow, what would you like to see?
I think, you mean in terms of what?
Well, I mean, really, if VR is readily available, if products like the HTC Vive are able to deliver presence, empathy, or instill empathy in others, what are some achievements you'd like to see out of that?
I mean, there's of course many, but I do think that VR will be hugely disruptive to education and health and wellness fields. I think, by the time 5-10 years, when this whole ecosystem is really built out, I think people can learn what people learn from grades 1 through 12 in a year. I believe that high schoolers can learn brain surgery and heart surgery in high school. I believe that that VR has this. I think it's fascinating how it's going to change the way our brains are wired. what we can do with that. And so, all those things added together, and I hope that, we get a chance to invest in sort of more, all the content that will sort of usher that genre.
So one more line of questioning for you, okay? I mean, you're putting out the hardware, you're putting out the tools to create these virtual reality experiences, but there has to be content out there to support it. And to create content, it's not just who's around today, because the content creators today have their hands full with existing media. So we're probably going to need a new batch of content creators. What are you doing? Like, I understand that you're involved with a presence, another use of presence. Can you elaborate a little bit more as to what you're doing to?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about VR relative to other computing platforms is, whether it was mobile or internet or PC, it was always work from ground up. And I mean that from the software stack, you always start with the OS and build content on top. With VR, that's sort of flipped around. What we've seen is a lot of content in software starting, and so it's really from top bottom. And I think we did establish a fund called Presence Capital, and we want to invest in software and content for VR. We know that right now hardware is much more mature than the software content. And having sort of grown up in mobile and seen how sort of hardware, software, and how these software services and content grow, we know that a lot of innovation will come outside of us, and a lot of innovation now will sort of use our platform to grow. And we want to invest in software and content. We know that all the software and content needs to come in order for this ecosystem to really take off. Right? It's not really a given that it will. And so we need to invest heavily in that. And so that's what Presence Capital will do.
So I think we should open it up to the audience for questions. Thanks so much. And let's, if there's any questions, please raise your hand. Okay, so this gentleman on the far left. Oh, yeah. Oh, Bernie, please go ahead.
Sure. You mentioned that the Presence Fund, and that sounds like a wonderful idea. You have a room full of content creators here, who I'm sure would like to know more about how to get involved in that.
Just like any fund, you send a pitch deck, and we'll get connected, and either it depends how far you're away from having a prototype or a demo or a product. But we love to hear from you. We want to hear ideas. We want to see decks. We want to see PowerPoint presentations. We want to hear from you.
And do you have an idea of the time frame?
What do you mean by that?
Well, how soon would you like to know about this? Obviously, sooner is better. But I'm trying to avoid asking you for a launch date, which you can't give me, obviously. But what time frame are you looking at for submissions? When would be too late?
No, I think, separate from the launch date, right, we're looking to invest in content, right? So we want to talk to you as soon as possible, depending where you are on your idea and development phase. But we want to hear from you. We see this as independent in the sense that we want to invest in the software content alone, regardless of the launch date. Now, if it coincides, great. But if not, there's a bigger picture of the whole ecosystem, right?
Thanks.
There's a hand up over there.
I'd love to hear more information on your partnering with Valve and how you co-collaborate. Where did the main development team take place? Did you send a satellite team to their offices? And we've seen hear reports of a Valve employee proposing virtually to their girlfriend. I'd just like to know, more about what that process was like for those teams working together.
It's interesting in HTC's sort of history of growth. I mean, we've set up shop in San Francisco and Seattle, naturally because of Google and Microsoft. And so and we also acquire companies in the Bay Area in Seattle, where sort of there's this constant flight between Seattle, Taiwan, and San Francisco. And this is no different, right? Seattle, our headquarters in America, HTC is in Seattle. And so it's kind of funny that we're talking about. Like, I scoured the world to sort of look for the next platform, but it was just right in our backyard in Seattle. And so that, we're very familiar with, I don't know if that answers your question, but in terms of location, the Seattle-Taiwan connections, we're very, very familiar with that work. So we do have a Seattle team, and we do have a Taiwan team, and they constantly go back and forth.
Does Valve have people in Taiwan?
What's that?
Does Valve have people in Taiwan?
They don't have full staff there, but it's they constantly fly out for sure.
Jan, one more question. Jan?
And this to me personally is surprising. HTC being a mobile company to a large extent. When you entered the VR space, you chose a PC-based platform, while some of your competitors like Samsung went into the mobile space or Google hardware. So, can you say anything about why you made that decision on the other way?
Well, what's interesting is if you look at the technology, even on mobile, right, for VR, you could have, if somebody made a conceptually built a VR headset, the year 2008, right? Because it's because of the screen size, the resolution, the lightweightness, and what we think is it's going to be, and this is also HTC's history. We've always thrived on premium experiences. We've always, we're the first to do 2G, 5G, 3G, 4G phones, first to do, aluminum, sort of one-piece phones. And we think it's the PC that will drive the experience. Right? You're much more convinced in the Vive than with a mobile VR version. And we think that's how will drive the ecosystem, and it's absolutely convincing when somebody tries the Vive. And so we want to be on that cutting edge, and we want to continue to push the hardware boundaries, push the computation boundaries, push all the boundaries that we can in terms of experiencing VR. I think what I like to say is it's really interesting to see that this year was the first year in computing history again, and Moore's law is slowing down, right? And obviously we don't believe that will continue to happen, but partly what we think is because there wasn't a real consumer application that was obvious that you need to keep pushing those boundaries. We think VR and AR changes that completely, right? And so we want to be at the front edge of that experience.
Very good. We're going to have all right, Martin, one more, just for Martin. Okay, go ahead, Martin.
Thank you. For your fund, what's the typical target investment you're looking to make?
I think right now because VR is so nascent and early, we're looking at seed, the seed stage, so anywhere between 100, 300.
Okay.
So we're starting there.
US dollars?
Yeah, yes. 100,000.
Okay, let me.
300,000.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks, Phil. Thanks so much. Let's give a round of applause.